Very good afternoon to all of you and warm greetings on behalf of JP Foundation JNU, Department of Information and International Relations and Bureau of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, India Tibet Coordination Office. In this afternoon, we have a guest, that is Honorable Prime Minister Dr. Lobsang Sangay, a democratically elected political leader of the Tibetan people. We also have Professor Anand Kumar, who will be presiding over the function, the founder of JP Foundation in JNU and also outside JNU. Warm welcome to other dignitaries of the dais, guests, invitees, press person, and my dear friends. Before going into the lecture, now I welcome Honorable Prime Minister, Professor Anand Kumar to come on the dais. Sir, please. Now I welcome Honorable Prime Minister Dr. Lobsang Sangay. Please, sir, please have your seat.
Good afternoon to all of you. Today in this afternoon we have Dr. Lobsang Sangay amongst us. Dr. Lobsang Sangay was born and grew up in a Tibetan settlement near Darjeeling, where he attended the Central School of Tibetans. He completed his BA Honours and LLB degrees from Delhi University. In the year 1992, he was elected as the youngest executive member of the Tibetan Youth Congress, Centrex. As a Fulbright scholar, he obtained his master's degree in the year 1996 and his doctorate in Judicial Sciences, SJD, in 2004. With the distinction of becoming the first Tibetan ever to receive such a degree from Harvard Law School. His dissertation, Democracy in Distress, Is Exile Polity a Remedy? A case study of Tibet's government in exile, received the Yong K. Kim 95 Prize. He has also been a research fellow and a senior fellow at Harvard. Dr. Sangay is an expert on international human rights law, democratic constitutionalism, and conflict resolution. He has spoken in hundreds of seminars around the world and organized major conferences among Chinese, Tibetan, Indian, and Western scholars, including 2 unprecedented meetings between His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Chinese scholars at Harvard University. In 2007, he was selected as one of the 24 young leaders of Asia by the Asia Society and a delegate to the World Justice Forum in Vienna, Austria. In 2011, he was elected to the post of Sikyong Prime Minister in an unprecedented competitive democratic election in the Tibetan diaspora. We, the students and delegates of JNU and outside present over here, are really grateful to have you amongst us, sir. Thank you.
My student friends, to present a gift. So first I'll name Mosumi. Please come. Yeah. Now I call upon Tanusri. Please. Sir, it's 3 books of Then Swapnil. And what's left? Yeah. Sir, it's a small gift from JNU, the second cup. Thank you so much. Now I request my JNU students, that's the Foreign Student Association President, to present a bouquet to Honorable Prime Minister. And next I request the Tibet Forum of JNU that they will present a memento. Now I'll request Professor Anand Kumar to speak about 5 minutes about the JP Foundation and its relation with other world.
Friends, today we are meeting to have another very important program with help of the Tibetan administration. Jayaprakash Narayan was one of the tallest freedom fighters and a man of peace. He began his career as a radical patriot, deeply committed to Marxist socialism. In his intellectual journey, he found himself much more engaged within the Gandhian paradigm, where the power to the people and justice for all, and struggle for justice through mass power, peaceful methods, but no compromise on question of freedom. This foundation was created as a tribute of JNU family when he passed away at the peak of his fame in 1979. And since then, every year, we have been inviting a person from public life to speak about one of the most central questions of the year. Speakers have included many eminent mind makers of our times, ranging from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Justice Tarkunde, to Kuldeep Nair, Arun Shourie, Professor Bimal Prasad, many scholars, statesmen, politicians, journalists, authors. Today, we are very happy that the first spokesperson, the first face of Tibetans in exile, Dr. Lobsang Sangay, has given us time to keep the process going, but we are very sad that we have to discuss a question which should have been resolved long back, if not in 1949, certainly in 1959, if not in 1959, certainly in 1962 or 65. But we have been postponing our engagement with this question, and that has complicated not only the future of Tibetan people and their civilization, but also the whole of Himalayan Asia, Nepal, Bhutan, to India. Everywhere you have this long shadow of the tragedy of Tibet. We are spending millions of rupees for no reason except the aggressiveness of our great neighbor, who used to have a very friendly attitude towards us as long as Tibet was a great buffer zone. Tibet got occupied under the influence, ideological madness in a way, of the people of China, leadership of China, and since then the whole Himalayan have become sad people. It's a zone of anxiety and nervousness. It's a zone of insecurity and underdevelopment, and we do not know how to come out of it. Actually, the way out of it is only through Tibet. Unless we put center stage the question of Tibet, we have no way out. And there is a great master who is trying to show us the way. That is His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Given the fact that His Holiness the Dalai Lama is not only a voice from Tibetan community, but also a voice of reason and compassion today, we are very sure that with the third generation of Tibetans in exile taking over, the issue of Tibet will get a new momentum, a new energy, and probably will come closer to our duty, and that is engaging China through the world opinion, including opinion of India, for a meaningful resolution. And I hope that today's talk will give you some first-hand information and a first-hand understanding, because what is happening today inside the Tibetan mind is known best to the speaker of the day, With these words, let me join all of you, the friends and family of JNU, to welcome this voice of Tibet, voice of compassion and reason, voice of the Dalai Lama, and of course, in a way, voice of all freedom lovers around the world, Dr. Lobsang Sangay. Dr. Lobsang Sangay, please.
Thank you very much, Professor Anand Kumarji, for your kind introduction and putting in perspective the issue of Tibet. Being a long time friend and true friend of Tibet, it's a great privilege to be here at Jawaharlal Nehru University and to be invited by Jayaprakash Narayan Foundation, especially taking so much care and attention and working hard to make this talk possible. And it's a great honor and privilege to be in the midst of many experts and thinkers I can see from here, with whom I have had privilege of discussing things and learning things about China and Himalayan region and Tibet as well. So just want to say on behalf of the Central Tibet Administration, well, how we say in India, hearty appreciation for inviting me here. And in the next 30 minutes, I'll share some aspect of Tibet, which will not be pleasant to some, but this is the reality in Tibet. So let me first begin by saying hearty appreciation and Tashi Dile, which is in Tibetan means good wishes to everybody. Thank you. Now, as for the topic, understanding the middle way approach to resolve the issue of Tibet, first I'll discuss the issue of Tibet, then make efforts to explain why it is in the interest of India and Asia to have the issue of Tibet resolved, and why should the international community pay interest and make efforts to address the situation in Tibet, and then some concluding remarks. As for the situation in Tibet, I'm sorry to say I don't have good news to report, but rather a really sad news. As you might have read in the papers or have heard through news media, that 86 Tibetans have self-immolated. Rather, 86 Tibetans have burned themselves in the form of protest, of which till date 72 have passed away. There was one self-immolation in 2009, and all the rest took place in 2011 and 12. In 2011, March 16th was the first one, Pinzola, and in 2011, the number of self-immolation took place pales in comparison to the numbers that have taken place in 2012. More than double the number of self-immolation have taken place in 2012 than in 2011. The latest count, just in the month of November, 20 plus Tibetans have self-immolated. And in 2011, Time magazine came out with the annual report, the least covered news in the whole world. Among the top 10 least covered news in the whole world, one of the top one, was self-immolation in Tibet. That was the Time magazine's report in 2011. Unfortunately, even in 2012, the self-immolation, sacrifices made by Tibetans, continue to remain the least reported news in the world. Now, unfortunately, from the Chinese government side, they have resorted to usual blame game, trying to blame it on us, the Tibetan administration, Tibetan leadership, His Holiness Dalai Lama, rather than address the causes of the self-immolation, and rather than fulfill the aspirations of Tibetans inside Tibet. They have labeled the self-immolation terrorist act instigated by people from outside. But then, if you analyze the very tragic and sad way of protest by Tibetans, you can clearly see what are the reasons, what are the factors leading to self-immolation. And they are continued occupation of Tibet, political repression, economic marginalization, environmental destruction, cultural assimilation, and denial of religious freedom, and so on and so forth. Why I said continued occupation? If you look at the people who have committed self-immolation, except for one who was 64 years old, almost all of them are below the age of 60. And many of them in the 20s, majority of them in the 20s or 30s. Meaning, these Tibetans were born and brought up since the occupation of Tibet in 1959. If you want to go way back, it's 1951. When the Chinese Red Army moved to Tibet, invaded Tibet, they promised socialist paradise for Tibetan people, that they are going to develop Tibet, and it will be paradise for Tibetans. They will benefit from the occupation, what they call liberation. After 50 years, Tibetans in Tibet are saying, we don't see socialism or paradise in Tibet. What we see is occupation and repression. Otherwise, these are the people who are supposed to have benefited from the peaceful liberation of Tibet. Whatever economic development the Chinese government has provided, the education that they have provided, the political freedom that they have provided, the cultural freedom they claim to have provided, these Tibetans are the beneficiary. But they are saying, not so. We don't accept the present arrangement. We don't accept the occupation, and we find the repression unbearable. And we are protesting in the worst, unfortunately sad way of protest. Why? Then I come to the political repression part. Because there is no space for any form of protest in Tibet. One can make that argument. Because there is no freedom of speech. If you are caught with the picture of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, the most revered leader of the Tibetan people, our spiritual leader, you will be arrested. You are in big trouble. You will go to jail. If you shout one slogan for religious freedom in the streets of Lhasa or in any town in Tibet, you will be arrested, you will be tortured. If you paste a poster on a wall, which JNU is known for, you will be in big trouble. Hence, when there is no space for any form of protest, hunger strike or dharna or anything, because likelihood of you getting arrested and tortured, even disappear, is high, Tibetans are saying self-immolation is the only way left. Because if you look at the form of protest that has taken place in Tibet, 87, 88, 89 in Lhasa, in and around Lhasa, peaceful demonstration. What happened to all of them? Arrested, tortured, humiliated, internal organs damaged, many die. If you look at 2007 or 2008, uprising all over Tibet, what happened to most of them? They were arrested, tortured, many have disappeared. Then 2009, 2011, 2012. Now, environmental destruction. I think we have people from Himalayan region, and Tibet is, from environment point of view, vital, not just for Asia and the Himalayan region, India, and the world as well. Because as per the scientists, even some Chinese scientists say, Tibet is called the third pole. After Antarctica and Arctic, Tibet has the third highest reserve of ice. When it melts, it turns into fresh water. And that's why the 10 major rivers of Asia origin in Tibet. Satluj River from Tibet to India, to Ladakh, to Kashmir, to Pakistan. Indus River, Brahmaputra River from Tibet to India to Bangladesh. Salween and Mekong River, the famous Mekong River, starts from Tibet and flows all the way to Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, and Burma. Yangtze River, we all have read about Yangtze dams. It originates in Tibet. Yellow River, some say the source of the origin of Chinese civilization, starts from Tibet. Now, how environmental destruction is taking place? Other than rivers, 132 or so minerals are found in Tibet, and all are exploited. Copper, uranium, gold, borax, you name it. According to scientists, according to Chinese sources, billions of dollars of worth of minerals, all are exploited. And unfortunately, not in a very scientific and environmentally friendly way. Rivers are dammed, not just one or two dams. Up to 10, some even report 20 dams per river. What happens is that when you start having so many dams, if it's not built correctly, if there's a crack, it will lead to floods downstream. And also the millions of people downstream, from the Himalayan region to Bangladesh, who survive on agriculture and fishery, are affected by the flow of the river, by damming of the rivers. So that's why there are some reports, whether it's true or not, in Arunachal Pradesh, in the Himalayan region, the level of rivers have decreased considerably compared to a few years ago. So there's some suspicion as to what is going on, whether the river is diverted up north, because the northeast of China has major water problem. China has 20% of the population of the world, 12% of fresh water, but 8%, which means 40% of the Chinese population. So if you look at 1.3 billion people, you're looking at almost 500 million people needing fresh water. So if these rivers are diverted and dammed, it affects people all downstream in South Asia and ASEAN countries. So that is why it is in the interest of India as well to look into the issue of Tibet. Now, cultural assimilation. Tibetan language, which as per the Chinese constitution says, should not only be used but encouraged. But if you go to the university level, medium of instruction is Chinese. High school level, medium of instruction is Chinese. Middle school level also. Now even at primary school level, Chinese government is imposing that the Chinese be the medium of instruction. That is why there was a protest in Repkong recently. It says primary school students marching in thousands in the streets of Repkong, saying, why should we learn in Chinese language when Tibetan language is rich? Here also it's connected to India because our scripture has Indian origin. We all say in Hindi, ka kha kha nga anga, but in Tibetan we say ka kha kha nga. We don't use anga. So scripture is very much Indian. And the Buddhism that I shared is very much restricted and repressed in Tibet, has its origin in India as well, from the Nalanda University. So that's why His Holiness Dalai Lama always say, India is our guru, we are your chela. So India's rich culture and scripture is also, it's not just Tibet's. I think we have India can claim a bit of ownership over Tibetan Buddhism and Tibetan scripture. And also, Tibetans, we say, two uncompromising principles that we follow are nonviolence and democracy, ahimsa. So we have subscribed to, as Professor Anand Kumarji said, power to people and justice for all, the very much Gandhian way of thinking. We have subscribed to Gandhian notion of ahimsa as well. And as I was introduced as democratically elected, Tibetans in 40 plus countries in diaspora voted on single day. All over the world, you have to vote on single day, same day. Otherwise, the ballots will be invalid. But our election commissioner is very strict, much stricter than T.N. Session or the present election commissioner. Tibetans all over the world, 40 plus countries, they vote in single day. To participate in the election was a competitive election in 2011. Then I got elected. But Tibetan democracy, again, we looked at Indian democracy, we looked at Indian constitution, and adopted most of the provisions that were relevant to us. So Tibetan democracy also is Indian democracy. For example, people in Ladakh, Changdang, I was there recently, Prince here. Anywhere from 18 to 20,000 feet high, nomads live in mountain tops, right? Local election commissioner. March 20th was the final round of election. Minus 40 degrees in snowstorm. Local Tibetan commission officials, election officials, they took the ballot boxes on the backs of yaks, donkeys, climbed the mountains for 3-4 days. Nomads came down from tents and voted. From Alaska to Australia, from New York to New Delhi, everybody participated. Because we have been practicing democracy for the last 50 years. So Tibetan democracy is very much consolidated. Thanks to India, because this is where we live, and adopting democracy and practicing democracy is part and parcel of Indian ethos. And we have done a pretty good job. It's not much well known, but we have done a pretty good job. So occupation, political repression, economic marginalization, environmental destruction, and cultural assimilation. Now, economic marginalization. Let me give you just one figure that should summarize the situation inside Tibet. 70, 50, 40. In Lhasa, 70% of the businesses, restaurants, hotels, even taxis are owned or run by Chinese. 50%, more than 50% now, this is according to 2002 data by Andrew Fisher. More than 50% of Communist Party members of Tibet Autonomous Region are Chinese. We're talking of common members. Obviously, the party secretary, the most powerful person, has always been Chinese, never been a Tibetan. Of the standing committee, the 13 members, 7 are Chinese often. Of the remaining 6, one is half Chinese, one is married to Chinese, or one has brother-in-law who is Chinese. And the top judges are Chinese. Top policemen are Chinese. And they're not just the top level, even the basic party membership. Reportedly around 45,000 in the Tibet Autonomous Region. More than 50% are Chinese. From postman to peon to the party secretary. And now, 70, 50, and 40. 40 is Tibetans in Lhasa and Tibet Autonomous Region. 40% of Tibetan university graduates or high school graduates are unemployed. So where is the socialist paradise? If you look around, shops, restaurants, and hotels are owned or run by Chinese. If you want to join the Communist Party, majority are Chinese. Even if you have a degree from high school or college, chances of getting employment is less. Now I have a picture which is available on, you can Google, it's available on internet as well, which says that there's a Chinese shop and advertises a job. If you're looking for a job, apply within. But it says, if you are Chinese, we give you 50 renminbi a day. If you are Tibetan, we give you 30 renminbi a day. Now, how would you feel if the signboard outside JNU cafeteria, which says that you can apply for a job in the cafeteria, but if you are Chinese, we give you 50 rupees. If you are Indian, we give you only 30 rupees a day. How would you feel? And they do it in Lhasa, the land of gods, the literal translation, the capital city of Tibet. So that kind of economic discrimination and marginalization is taking place. Of course, you see roads, you see electricity, you see buildings, and then Chinese government comes with this GDP and the growth rate. But the question is, who is benefiting from it? Of course, there are some Tibetans who benefit, but 70+%. These are the reasons why Tibetans are protesting, farmers are protesting, nomads are protesting, women, nuns, students, even the elder Tibetans are protesting. Now, what are their aspirations? What are they asking for? Two things. All the self-immolators have made their demand or aspiration very clear. Return of His Holiness the Dalai Lama to Tibet. Number two, freedom for Tibetans. These are the two basic demands. And the Chinese government is trying to have the international community focus on the action, whether the self-immolation is a violent act or not, is a terrorist act or not, whether international community should support or not. And in fact, there was one couple of articles which said this is very un-Buddhistic. My goodness, Communist Party of China, who says religion is poison, suddenly started preaching Buddhism to the world and giving a Buddhist analysis of self-immolation. But we should focus more on the causes. What are the causes? What forced them? Life is precious, we all know. Even if someone slaps you, you don't like that. You might slap back. Unless you're Jesus Christ, you show the other cheek. But normally that's human reaction. But, setting oneself on fire. Who would do that? If there is any other choice, Tibetans will choose the alternative way to protest. But what are the causes? What forced them to do it? These are the reasons. And what are the aspirations? Freedom for Tibetans and return of His Holiness the Dalai Lama to Tibet. Now, of course, there is this theological, philosophical debate as to what is self-immolation. But one thing we must know is that of these 86 self-immolators, yes, they have tragically burned themselves, but they have not harmed anyone else. No Chinese shop, no Chinese restaurant, no Chinese hotel, not even a single Chinese. Even in that form of protest, you can clearly see there's a restraint on their part. To hurt oneself, yes, but not hurting anyone, especially the Chinese. So this is the grim reality of Tibet presently. And Indian government and people of India have been extremely kind to Tibetan people. I say this, and I sincerely believe it. After taking over the political leadership, more than ever I believe, India has done the most for Tibetans. And Indian people have been the most steadfast friend of Tibetan people. Because the largest number of Tibetans are in India. Tibetan administration is based in India. So other than India, I don't know where else we can have such kind of setup. So we owe a lot to India and Indian people. And being born and brought up myself in Darjeeling and educated in the Indian government subsidized school, Tibetan refugee school in Darjeeling, and went to Indian government subsidized, not JNU, but Delhi University. So I'm very much a product of India as well. So again, India has another ownership. The Tibetan political leadership also is made in India. I do believe, and we have many experts in JNU, did not say much, from geopolitical point of view, before 1951, Tibet as the buffer zone between India and China to the largest populated countries didn't have common border. Now they do. And it has brought complexities and challenges and conflicts, which we read in Indian news media. Now, when we talk about China and Tibet, it's not just up in the Himalayan mountains now. Of course, on the side of Tibet, Chinese government has built 5 major airfields. There are 30 or so airports, but 5 major military airfields. They're building one more. They have brought railway line to Lhasa, from Beijing to Golmut in Qinghai to Lhasa, and now they are stretching it to, eventually the plan is to go to Shigatse and maybe to Sikkim, to Nepal, and to Bangladesh, Burma area. You can see, strategically. And then seaport in Pakistan, they're building a major seaport in Sri Lanka. Another attempt was made, not succeeded, in Burma as well. So when we talk about Chinese presence, I think it's from the Indian Ocean to Bay of Bengal, from the air to the land, it's there. So in that sense, addressing the issue of Tibet is in India's national security's interest as well. That's why, we have appealed to make Tibet one of the core issues of India as well, because China says Tibet is one of the core issues, along with Taiwan, South China Sea, and Tibet. Now, why should the international community pay interest and support the issue of Tibet? Because everybody talks about this rise of China, militarily, economically, what China is going to be. But we have lived with China side by side for many, many hundreds of years. We're quite familiar. Recently, in Europe, I gave a talk in which I said, well, we don't fear China. They were really surprised. They said, how can you say you are a Tibetan? How come you can't fear China? I said, we really don't, because we know them pretty well. So why should we fear? And we are fighting for our justice. We are pursuing our aspirations. At the moment, the repression is going on. So international community also, there's rise of China. And the Chinese government says their international policy or foreign policy is peaceful rise. They are rising peacefully. But South China Sea and Senkaku or Taoyu Island, and with the conflict with Philippines and Vietnam, says something else. But they say we are rising peacefully. So international community need not worry. And they say our domestic policy is harmony, Hu Jintao's declared policy. Now, if they're rising peacefully, the international community should say, we want to see peace in Tibet. If there's harmony is the domestic policy, they want to see harmony in Tibet. There is no harmony. That's why Tibetans are self-immolating. And the US foreign policy says they will pivot to Asia. If Asia is the main focus of US foreign policy, then I think they should pay attention to the issue of Tibet as well, because it's urgent. There was one self-immolation initially in Tunisia, and many media and experts said that that was the catalyst for Arab Spring. The international community rallied and supported the democratic demonstrators in Tunisia and said, how can this be possible? Tunisia needs democracy, Tunisian people needs freedom, because there's one self-immolation, unemployed undergraduate. 2 weeks later, the President Ben Ali had to flee, obviously with plain load of money, but he fled. Then moved to Egypt. Tahrir Square still continues even today. Oh, international community should support Tahrir Square. They are the demonstrators. They are fighting for freedom. Now Syria is continuing. Tanks are rolling, helicopters are flying, rockets are flying. What about Tibetans? We are also human beings. Our blood is as red as people in Tunisia and Egypt or Syria. How come? You roll out everything for one set of movement, and then you hesitate to say anything or say few things on the issue of Tibet. So Tibet is a litmus test for the international community. If they say we support freedom and human rights, and support human rights and freedom for Tibetan people as well. It's a litmus test for China as well. If they say we are rising peacefully, we have harmony, show it in Tibet. In that sense, Tibet is vitally important. It's a test. Because we have subscribed to and implemented and embraced democracy and nonviolence for the last many decades. As I said, ahimsa and democracy is what we subscribe to. Now, if the international community does not support us, we will continue to march forward with democracy and nonviolence as uncompromising principles. We will. But it will be a statement to the international community that they don't want to support democracy and nonviolence. And it's all right by us, because ultimately Tibetan people, we have to assert ourselves and we have to pursue our own aspirations. But it will be a statement to the international community, and it will be a statement or example for other marginalized groups, other refugees, other ethnic groups around the world who are also watching the issue of Tibet. Once they see the nonviolence and democracy are not supported, they might choose, and they will most likely choose other means to pursue their goals. Then whenever there is a violence, international community rush to put down the fire. But it is too little too late. You could have prevented that conflict from turning into violence to begin with, had the international community supported democracy and nonviolent movement of Tibet and other movements. Hence, it's a test for the international community to practice what they preach. Now, let me conclude by saying this. I'm often asked this question. Well, we know the Tibet situation. It's tragic, it's sad, but we think it's hopeless. Because China is growing in power. No one wants to stand up to China. So who will come to your rescue? To that I always say, and it's always true, the foundation of any movement is your own people. India succeeded in gaining its independence because Indian people's belief in their cause was strong, not that the international community came rescued. Similarly, Tibetan cause will be determined by the Tibetan spirit, Tibetan sense of solidarity, Tibetan sense of determination, Tibetan sense of unity. And I'm glad to report, in that sense, Tibetan spirit and solidarity and unity has never been strong in recent history as we see today. Tibet, inside Tibet, whether they're young or old, nomads or farmers, students or teachers, after 50 years of occupation, they feel very strongly about Tibetan identity, and the assertion and demand for their dignity is alive. We have not met them. the self-immolators have not met His Holiness the Dalai Lama, but their faith and loyalty to Tibet and Tibetan people is very strong. That is the foundation. Hence, there is hope. That is why, after 16 years in America, with my job at Harvard, I left everything and returned to India. Nowadays, I have to substitute our Indian chai for coffee, but it's all right. Why? Because I believe that our day will come. And that's what Tibetans believe. That's why many Tibetans have joined me from San Francisco, from Los Angeles, from New York, from Canada, to be in the administration. They all are paid in rupees, not in dollars. Still, why? We Tibetans believe we owe that much to Tibet, to the elder generation, to His Holiness the Dalai Lama. They have worked so hard in building this movement and sustaining this movement. Now it is the responsibility of the younger generation to carry forward and build on the legacy of the elder generation, which we will do. Now with better education, better exposure from around the world, Tibetan movement will only grow stronger as years ahead. And number two, if you just look around, I've been to a couple of conferences where I have met, and one incident from Baltic states, Estonian. And I asked her, do you think in 1980s that Baltic states are three small countries, right, under Soviet Union, did you think that you will ever become free? And she said, oh, in our head, no, but in our heart, yes. But as far as Tibetans are concerned, in our head and heart, we believe our day will come. Then you look around. Color revolution. And then recently many experts, I'm sure, I don't know about experts in JNU, many people said Islam and democracy are not compatible, even though Indonesia was democratic. Then Arab Spring swept through Arab countries. Now Islam and democracy are also compatible. Just a few months ago, who would have thought Aung San Suu Kyi would be free from a house arrest and accept a Nobel Peace Prize, get a Congressional Gold Medal, and have a long tour of India recently, where she gave Nehru lecture. So who would have thought that she would be walking around free? Just a few months ago, isn't it? I'm sure you had discussion here. You always say, oh, Aung San Suu Kyi looks very hopeless. She has been under house arrest for so long. She's out. So not just the color revolution swept through the Eastern European countries and Arab Spring through the Arab countries. Now it has touched the soil of Asia also in the form of Aung San Suu Kyi in Burma. So next, it will be us, the Tibetan people. And with friends like Anand Kumarji and others, we will make our turn. So we are very happy to see what happened in Arab countries. We are very happy to see what happened to Aung San Suu Kyi. Now, we want you to be very happy what happens in Tibet next. So with that belief, I would like to say Tibet will be one of the most beautiful stories of the 21st century. And we will be upfront doing it. And with your friendship, with your support, we all will get there one day soon. Till then, let's keep Tibetans in your minds and hearts. With solidarity, we'll walk forward. And as others have succeeded, we will succeed as well. Thank you.
You said India has a very important role for Tibetan freedom. But recently India has started to accept one China and Tibet as an integral part of China. So don't you think the freedom has been...
As for Tibetans in India, where they are comfortable, can they relate, connect, and will they stand up and join the Tibetan cause as Tibetan inside Tibet. I sincerely do believe they do, because I'm also born and brought up in India. And there are many Tibetans whom you, at the campus of JNU, might seem a little humble with humility and maybe little, in a typical Tibetan sense, little less assertive. But we all know deep in their hearts, internally, it pains them, it burns them. So Tibetan youth in India and around the world are growing stronger and stronger. For example, let me give you a couple of examples. One example in Boston, where I spent the last 16 years. In 2008, there was massive uprising in various places of Tibet. And Tibetan youth, most of them were born and brought up in Boston, in the teens. They said, we have started this every Wednesday from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. They had a vigil. And a small group of Tibetans, anywhere from 10, 20, sometimes up to 200-300 people come. So they started this vigil. And then they said, we will not end the vigil till repression ends in Tibet. So from 2008, March of 2008, to 2012, now it's been 4.5 years, every Wednesday you go to Harvard Square, just outside Harvard Square, there's a vigil from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. They're born and brought up in Boston, in America. So there has been 4.5 years, they're still doing it. So in Boston and Harvard, all the leaders from around the world who pass by Harvard Square is a very popular place. So you will see them. Even Chinese, many people Chinese see them because I've been there myself. Just recently in Geneva, I think in Switzerland, 4 Tibetan youth, they bent, they just sat on their knees before the UN building. And they said they will do it whole day, if possible 4 days of protest. You go to New York, Tibetan youth and students. You go to Australia, student groups, all over the place. When I say sense, the Tibetan spirit, Tibetan solidarity has never been stronger in recent years compared to now. It's true. For example, me and my friends, when we were in Delhi University, we were greatly influenced by Tibetan protests in 1987, 88, 89. Because we were here in Delhi University. I joined DU in 88, graduated in 91, then stayed on to do my law till 94. When protests happened inside Tibet, it moved us. We took it to the streets of Jantar Mantar, Chinese Embassy, India Gate, you have me. We know the SHO of Chanakya police station very well. They knew us by names. So that kept us going. Why we are engaged even today? That protest inside Tibet sparked in us. Of course, we all were committed generally, but activism. Now, with 2007, animal fur burning, that demonstrated how loyal Tibetans are towards His Holiness and how strong Tibetans are. In Amravati, in South India, His Holiness Dalai Lama gave a Kala Chakra teaching. It's a Buddhist teaching, where in the end of the teaching, he gave a talk to Tibetans from Tibet. And he said, Tibet, as per Tibetan custom, we wear animal fur, animal skin. It's a small piece. Could be tiger, could be leopard, could be fox, could be anything. This has been going on for hundreds and thousands of years. As you know, Tibetans are people from the mountains. So this he said, because as wildlife people, and also they made documentary where endangered species like tigers and leopards in India and in Asia affected. So His Holiness Dalai Lama said this animal skin should be, we should not be using it. Even though it's hundreds of years old custom, but we should not be using it. He gave the speech. Within 2 weeks' time, all over Tibet, they started burning animal skins. Any chuba you have, any dress you have with a piece of animal skin, they burned it. There was a bonfire all over Tibet. Now you go to Tibet, except for a few places where Chinese government really pushed them to, 90+% of Tibetan areas in Tibet, they don't wear animal fur, even though it has been going on for hundreds of years. Now, what is the equivalence of animal fur? Tiger or leopard, very precious, very expensive. You pay thousands of dollars. It's like, nowadays for women, it's like your Gucci bag or Armani bag. For man, it's like Rolex watch or Rado or an expensive kind of watch. Now, a leader tells you to throw your Rolex watch and burn your Armani bags. Which leader can say and people will do it? After 50 years of separation, very expensive, but they burnt it. No one wears it even today, in Tibet even today. Why? If 50 years is whether you're youth or old. And then in 2008, protests all over Tibet. Now this younger generation of Tibetans, they're in the teens, very young. You see Tibetan people protesting all over, it affects you. Now 2011 and 2012, the self-immolation has affected people, Tibetan people, like never before. So I think Tibetan youth are very committed to the Tibetan cause. So Tibetans are quite gentle in nature, so it's quite deceptive. That's why our issue is alive inside Tibet as well. Chinese government felt, oh, Tibetans seems quite peaceful, non-violent. Maybe we have taken over, we have occupied it. But they are sadly disappointed time and again. So in that sense, I firmly believe. Now, as for the issue of one China, I think here I'll be coming to the topic of the today's presentation, middle way policy. Middle way policy means, as per the Tibetan administration is concerned, our policy is to seek genuine autonomy or meaningful autonomy within the People's Republic of China. Genuine autonomy within the framework of the Chinese constitution. So what Tibetans seek does not challenge China's sovereignty and territorial integrity, not seek independence. In that sense, if Tibetans are granted autonomy, that's the if. One China is not challenged. It's not that we have subscribed to one China. If Tibetans are granted genuine autonomy, then one China is not challenged. So in that sense, India's policy is not in conflict with the policy of the Tibetan administration. Now, why should the Chinese government, again, this is a broad answer related to your question will be, in that sense, the addressing or solving the issue of Tibet is not a constitutional challenge for China, nor an institutional challenge for China, or lack of political will. Let me explain. As per the Chinese Constitution, Article 4 of 1982 allows for genuine autonomy for Tibetans. So what Tibetans are saying, if the Chinese government implements their own laws, that will amount to genuine autonomy. Chinese government refused to implement their own laws, hence there's a problem. But as per Article 31, which allows for a special administrative region, based on that, one country, two system was established in Hong Kong and Macau. So constitutionally, a separate system for different group is already there. And Chinese government has established one country, two system in Macau and Hong Kong. Why are they not willing to do so for Tibet and Tibetan people? Now on Taiwan, even though large number of Taiwan, majority of Taiwan wants status quo, large number of Taiwan is also pursue independence. But Chinese government says, if you accept one China, two interpretation, two territories, we want to solve the issue of Tibet. From the Chinese government side, they have shown interest to solve the issue of Tibet, of Taiwan. But the Taiwanese have different views. What it also shows is that the Chinese government willingness to solve, even though how to solve is a different matter in Taiwan. Hence the question, how come you are not solving the issue of Tibet? Constitutionally and institutionally, you have addressed Hong Kong and Macau. You are showing interest to solve the issue of Taiwan, but why not Tibet? This raises a very disturbing question. If you look at Hong Kong and the Macau, they say they are Chinese, so we solve it. So are you saying to us, Tibetans, or you are Tibetans, hence we don't want to solve your issue, which means you are not Chinese? Or the most disturbing question is, we don't trust you. We trust people in Hong Kong, they are Chinese. We trust people in Macau, they are Chinese, but not you. Hence, there is this element, Han chauvinism, element of Han chauvinism. We trust Han Chinese. We solve it. We're not Tibetans. This raises a very big question for the whole world, Asia and India as well. Here comes the broader picture as to why addressing the issue of Tibet is in the interest of China and India and Asia and the world. Because we have to understand the notion of Tungguo, China, mainland China. It's called Tungguo in Chinese. Tungguo means the Middle Kingdom, by which you mean you are the middle of the universe, by which you mean people in the periphery, Tibetans, Mongolians, and Xinjiang are barbarians. You are the Middle Kingdom, Han Chinese people are the civilized people. And people in the periphery are barbarians. Hence you have to be civilized, hence you have to be liberated. By extension, sorry to say, to India as well and to the rest of the world, anyone outside of the Middle Kingdom are all barbarians. So we all are barbarians in their eyes. Hence this notion of Middle Kingdom, Tungguo, makes it difficult. They say, when it comes to Han Chinese, oh, you're Tungguo Ren, we'll solve it. When it comes to Tibetans, oh, you're not Tungguo Ren. You're not Chinese. We don't trust you. So that level of mistrust is extended to the rest of the world because that level of mistrust prevails even in Tibet even today. So this is very important. Why? Because I have talked to many Chinese. If there are some Chinese in this audience, I'm happy to answer their questions. But often they say, I have been to Tibet. I went there for vacation during summer. No Tibetan told me they have a problem. So how come you exile Tibetans complaining about all these things? Because I've met hundreds of Chinese, and as introduced, I've organized many conferences between mainland Chinese scholars and Tibetan scholars at Harvard for many years. And then I always ask the question, so you have been to Tibet? Yes. So did you book your air ticket through Chinese travel agency? They say yes. Did you stay in a Chinese-owned hotel? They say yes. Did you eat in Chinese restaurant? They say yes. So you were taken around by a Chinese tourist guide? They say yes. So I said, what's the fun of going to Tibet? You should be staying in Tibetan hotel. No, they said, no. Our tour guide told us it's risky. See? You can't even sleep in a Tibetan hotel, and then you say we are part of the family, we are brothers and sisters. See the level of mistrust. So then I said, how can you see anything about Tibet? When you are booked, stay in a hotel, ate in a restaurant, and bought things in Chinese shop, and what's the point of going to Tibet? Might as well go to Shanghai, because if you go to Tibet, given the altitude, you get altitude sickness. Now, they say, I asked so many Chinese, so many Tibetans, they say they have no problem. How can they say they have a problem? Because you have a Chinese face, you are the colonial master. You are the spy who complains, who informs. You are the policeman who beats you. How can you say I have a problem? And then fundamentally, Chinese people cannot get to the root of the problem because there is language barrier. If you ask in Chinese to a Tibetan, Ni shi Zhongguo ren ma? Meaning, are you Chinese? You're asking in Chinese. The answer is often how? Yes. Because that's a politically correct thing to say, right? But if you ask in English to the same Tibetan, are you Chinese? They qualify the answer. They will say, well, I'm a Tibetan from China. See, they will not say I'm Chinese. They say, I'm Tibetan from China. Now, if you ask in Tibetan, Kera Gemi Yimbe, same question. Are you Chinese? Me? No. I am Tibetan. Why? In Tibetan language, there is no term that combines China and Tibet as one. There is no term that combines Tibetan and Chinese people as one people. There is no one term that combines Chinese and Tibetan as one language. China is Gana, Tibet is Pe. Chinese is Gemi, Tibetans are Peba. And Chinese language is Gyake, Tibetan language is Peke. See? Unless you speak Tibetan language, you will never get to the fundamental issue, because you cannot communicate them, you can't ask the right question. I'm sorry to say, even if you ask in Hindi, you will not get a complete answer. So that's why Chinese don't understand. And there's a fundamental mistrust. Hence, they saw Hong Kong, they saw Macau, they are giving huge autonomy to Shenzhen, Guangdong, Shanghai. Autonomy is distributed everywhere, but not to Tibetans. So why? You are not Chinese. So this is a problem not just for Tibetans, but also for the rest of the world in India. The fundamental mistrust is based on Tungguo, the Middle Kingdom. Rest are barbarians. So till the Chinese government solved the issue of Tibet, we can be pretty sure they have yet to overcome the mistrust. They are yet to accept or embrace diversity. Because Tibet is a test. If you grant autonomy to Tibetans, then for the first time, Chinese are embracing diversity and really giving autonomy to the people who deserve, who should have, other than Han Chinese people. That's why Tibet is a test. So it is in the interest of the international community to support the Tibetan cause. Once Tibetans are granted autonomy, then you realize there is a moderation of China, because they have accepted diversity. If not, if you want to deal directly with Chinese, they think they are Tungguo Ren, and they look at you like barbarians and treat you like one with a smile.
As you are a democratically elected leader of PM of Tibet, why not you demand United Nations to pass a resolution in UN Security Council and General Assembly as a seat for the Tibet, and what is the perception of UN for the independence of Tibet?
9, it is written that the basis of our demand is the concept of national and regional autonomy for minority nationalities, propounded by Marx, Lenin, Mao, and the provisions enshrined in the Constitution of the PR. So, in India, we are also facing the same issues, the issues of minorities, whether it is the issue of Bodo land, Nagaland, or the issue of Kashmir. So, I just want to know your opinion on the issue of Western and Northeast and this Kashmir, and how should we see the relevance of the middle way approach on the issue?
Many years ago was murmuring for its struggle of independence, and then we got Mahatma Gandhi as the catalyst, and there was a loud outcry for the struggle of independence. Do you think that Dalai Lama, if allowed to come back, then it would be a great help to you to come out of this kind of repression?
Tibetan administration policy is middle way to seek genuine autonomy within People's Republic of China, within the framework of the Chinese Constitution. And in that sense, idealism and pragmatism is addressed here. And I think some of the Tibetan youth and students might disagree with this stand, and they do. They always criticize us as well, now being in the administration. How can you be so reasonable? How come you're giving so much concession to the Chinese government? And international community also say the same thing. But Tibetan administration, being pragmatic and realistic, has been as moderate and as reasonable as possible. We are simply saying, if the Chinese government implement your own laws, we'll take that as autonomy. Now, how pragmatic or reasonable the Tibetan has been. So that's why it is also in the interest of China to address the issue of Tibet. Now, whether Tibet be used as a pawn, as you use the word, by India, US and all, It's not a question of using. We do want the international community, India, to raise the issue of Tibet with Chinese government. Now, whether we are used or not, we want it to be raised. Now, whether we are discarded at the end or not, as you said, they will use and throw you away, that doesn't matter. Because why? Ultimately, as I said, the Tibetan cause will be determined by Tibetan people, will be defined by the Tibetan people. It's the strength, the solidarity, unity, perseverance of Tibetan people will determine the outcome, not just the support. Support is necessary component, but the crucial is for the Tibetan people. So we want the issue of Tibet to be raised by India and rest of the world. Now, that addresses your question, what happens to all these other issues in India? Because we seek genuine autonomy within the framework of the Chinese constitution, and we seek non-violently, so this is what we advocate, and we can't prescribe. Then we can't comment on other issues if they differ on this issue, because we seek non-violently, we seek autonomy within the framework of Chinese constitution. So that's what we seek. Now, whether other issues in India follow that model or not, it's up to them. But this is what we advocate, and this is what we share. Now, United Nations and General Assembly, yes, it's true, it sounds good. That's an idealistic kind of a body. UN Security Council has China as one of the permanent members who with veto power. Each time issue of Tibet is raised, they veto and then it's sidelined. UN General Assembly has already passed 3 resolutions on Tibet, 1951, 61, and 65. The 1961 resolution of the United General Assembly calls for right of self-determination to Tibetan people. But still, General Assembly is an advisory body. Security Council is the executive body. Advisory body just advises, is not mandated that the Security Council follow. Hence, it's lying there. That is why recently the United Nations Human Rights Commissioner, Navi Pillay, came out with a very strong worded statement on the issue of Tibet. This is remarkable and significant because United Nations is under tremendous pressure from the Chinese government. Despite the pressure, she came out with a statement on the issue of Tibet and self-immolation. She said the grievances of Tibetans need to be addressed. And then she also shared that 12 recommendations or requests were made to the Chinese government for UN delegation or international delegation to visit Tibetan areas to assess the situation so they can report to the Chinese government and the international community. All requests were denied so far. The US ambassador, Gary Locke, visited Tibetan areas. Even he came out with a strong statement. So despite the pressure, the UN Human Rights Commissioner, the ambassadors, they have spoken out. That reflects how serious the situation in Tibet is. Now, whether the Tibet issue will resolve during my lifetime or not, and you said you wish me well and hope it does, and not only I hope, but I believe it will be resolved during my lifetime. That I'm certain. Now, as for Buddha Dharma, being alternative or competing philosophy to communism, and there is not even a competition. Communism, I'm sure this is JNU, but it's 100-some years old philosophy or ideology. Buddha Dharma is 2,600 years old, almost. So old is gold, is ancient. Buddhism has seen many ideologies have come and gone. Buddhism has prevailed. So in China also, Buddhism has prevailed for 2,600 years. It will prevail for another 2,500 years. So that is why, because our movement, Tibetan cause, is embedded on a solid philosophy with such long history, we are absolutely certain if we have to go toe-to-toe, Buddhism will prevail. Having said that, His Holiness Dalai Lama himself says he is half Marxist, or rather half Buddhist Marxist. But he subscribed to the socio-economic aspect of communism, but not the political Leninist or Stalinist authoritarianism of Communist Party. So nothing against communism, but the party and the authoritarian nature of it and the exploitative nature of it that you see in Tibet will not prevail. And another odd thing is the largest number of Buddhists in the entire world is in China. 300 million Buddhists, as per the official record. Some also say 400. So there are more Buddhist members than Communist Party members in China. 82 million Communist Party members, 300 official documents, maybe 3, 4, 500 million Buddhists. So already in China, there are more Buddhists than Communist Party members. Having said that, it's nothing, all ideology has its own valid, because having studied all kinds of philosophy, all valid, valid. In fact, I subscribe more to Max Weber than Karl Marx. I'm more of a, the critique from the cultural aspect of it, and it's more relevant to Tibet. Yes, and Buddhism has always been a dominant philosophy in the world, and it will remain for a long time.
My question is, it doesn't I cannot accept the whole protest of the Tibetan people. In a way, we protest to the highest level of sacrifices we have. Tibetan peoples are giving, that is the self-immolation. And on the other way round, the same Tibetan people, they're boosting the Chinese economy. Though they're saying that it is the only means of their livelihood. So I'm asking, is this politically or fundamentally a wrong way of protest, or your future methods or perspective include some Gandhian non-cooperation kind of movement? So, or it is the definition of protest, such kind of protests are not accepted by Tibetans over. Thank you.
What is the basis of the Tibet's history? Tibet was an independent country for hundreds of years. And you need not go far. In 821 and 22, there was a treaty signed between China and Tibet, which said that Tibetans will be happy in the great land of Tibet. Chinese will be happy in the great land of China, signed by Tibetans and Chinese representatives. So at one time, Tibet was a major power. King Songtsen Gampo and his, during the Songtsen dynasty. Tibet's empire extended all the way to the river Ganga here, Ganges River, and all the way to Central Asia, all the way to China. The capital of China, Xi'an, then, was occupied by Tibet for a month. In fact, the Chinese emperor was deposed. So militarily, Tibet was very powerful. So at that time, given Tibet's power or influence, the princess of Nepal married King Songtsen Gampo. Chinese princess was given in marriage to Tibetan King Songtsen Gampo, because that's how you try to make a good relationship. So Tibet was a major power, and then you go through many periods now. You can go from Tang to Sung to Ming to Yuan, all that, and all the way to the Qing, and then the nationalist government, and then as late or as early as 1911. Again, we had similar experience with the previous Dalai Lama also, 13th Dalai Lama. Chinese army moved into Lhasa, 13th Dalai Lama fled to India, and he resided mainly in Kalimpong and Darjeeling area. But then in 1911, late 1900, early 1912, His Holiness the 13th Dalai Lama returned to Tibet and declared itself an independent country, and signed a treaty with Mongolia as well. So from 1911 to 1951, when the occupation, the Red Army moved in, Tibet was, if not de jure, de facto independent country. All the historians agree to that fact. And then in that period, now that comes to the border issue. 1914, British India and the government of Tibet, under Lunchin Chatra, our prime minister then, they met in Simla, and what the document that they signed is called Simla Agreement. The representative from British India was McMahon. So hence the McMahon line, the border, that is the demarcated border that you have now, it's called McMahon because Sir McMahon was representing British India. Now, according to many Indians, that's the preferred border line, demarcation. McMahon line is the preferred border for India because there's a clear demarcation. Now, if that's the preferred border, the Indian government has to recognize the entity or the government that signed it. That was Tibetan government. If that border is valid, the signatories too, the treaty should be also of legitimate government. That's Tibet. So now solving the issue of Tibet, what will happen is that by solving the issue of Tibet, one way to argue, again, there's so many other factors, variables here. One way to argue is that McMahon line will be the demarcated border that includes Arunachal and Tawang and other areas. So hence solving the issue of Tibet could solve the border issues as well. And then also it brings puts less pressure on both the countries. Otherwise they are facing one-to-one without Tibetans or Tibet as the buffer zone. Now Nepal and Bhutan. Yes, when Nepal applied for its UN membership in 1955, they had 7 evidence to prove that Nepal was an independent country, hence it deserves membership in the United Nations. Number 1 reason, treaty relationship with Tibet. So Nepal got in the UN membership by giving its treaty relationship with Tibet as an evidence that it was a sovereign nation. But to prove sovereignty, you must prove that you have capacity to enter into a treaty with another sovereign country. And Tibet was evidence in point. And Bhutan and Tibet had very close relationship for many, many centuries. Buddhism, similar culture, similar dress. Bhutanese love chili, ematharsi. But the Tibetans in that side of area also, in the Kongbo area, and they also love chili as well, yes. And as for Nepal, it's unfortunate that it has come under so much pressure from the Chinese government that essentially made the lives of Tibetans in Nepal very difficult. Very difficult. Otherwise, at human level, at cultural level, Nepalese and Tibetans have so many similarities. I grew up in Darjeeling. Nepali bhasha bolcha. Gundruk phaksha khancha. You know. And dasaima daushure khelcha, haina. So, I personally, I know Nepal and Nepali people. I mean, we have this, all the Himalayan belt. We have so much, personal feelings and respect for each other. We have lived side by side for hundreds and hundreds of years. Before there was no China, it was Tibetans and Nepalese, Tibetans and Bhutanese. We had some issues at one time or the other, few times. But for hundreds and thousands of years, we have lived side by side peacefully. Tibet was the source of many rivers. Tibet was also a source of culture and faith at one point. So people in Nepal and Bhutan should look at Tibetans that way. And they do, many do. At the people's level, they do. But even at the government level. So China is a reality for sure. But what is the reality? Is the reality benefiting you? I just had a question from a journalist. They say, oh, India's economic interest with China, hence Tibet issue is sidelined. But yes, from last what I read, India buys more Chinese goods, India pays more money to China, and Chinese are profiting from the business relationship. Now you're worried about the business relationship. That's not kind of a good business deal, right? You buy their goods, you give them the profit, you give your money, you buy their goods, you give them profit, and now you're also a little scared to say about things. You take your money as well. So India gives more profit to China. But you're more worried about the business relationship, so you're more worried about giving more profits to China? The point being, also I have friends from Nepal. They say, no, we also want railway line all the way to Kathmandu. I say, kyun? Kiana? Business garnu parcha. We have to do business with China. Tell me, which country in Asia is benefiting or profiting from doing business with China? Why you want to do business with China when you know you will give them your money? You buy their goods and they scold you, you listen. I said, no, we want a railway line all the way to Kathmandu. And I said, once the railway line comes, you should know what's happening in Lhasa. More Chinese are coming. Demographically, they're overwhelming Tibetan population. When the railway line comes to Kathmandu, I said the ring road will be surrounded by Chinese. Oh, the Nepalese diplomat told me, you're right, actually Tamil is already dominated by Chinese. And the Chinese embassy is more powerful than Indian embassy or US embassy in Kathmandu. So yes, China is a reality, but what kind of reality for Bhutan? If it serves your purpose, it serves your interests, it gives you profit, all the more. But if it dominates you, and you give your profit, you give your money and compromise your morals, that kind of reality should not be accepted. So in that sense, actually, Tibet example, Tibet experience is a lesson. This is what we share with the Himalayan people in the Himalayan belt, with Nepal, Bhutan, all the rest of the world. What happened to us is tragic and sad. But it could happen to you. Hence we share our stories. So Tibet is a cautionary note. Otherwise they have this fear psychosis or zero-sum mindset. That, let's not talk about Tibet, and then we will be treated fairly or gently by the Chinese government. Not so. So all the reasons, because I've dealt with Chinese, because I've organized conferences, if you stand up for your principles, they respect you. Confucianism is based on pragmatism. If you don't stand up, if you go by Chinese history, they'll make you kowtow. There's a sit, then kowtow. Before Chinese emperor, that's a history, right? If you stand up, they respect you. People say, His Holiness Dalai Lama meeting with the Western leaders will have a major repercussion. His Holiness met with Obama. His Holiness met with David Cameron and Nick Clegg of Great Britain. Chancellor and Foreign Minister of Australia in Vienna. Prime Minister Harper of Canada. What are the repercussions? Their business is continuing with all these countries with China. So one shouldn't have this zero-sum mindset. Yes, one should have a relationship. We always say India should have a relationship with all the neighboring countries, including China. But it has to be pragmatic and realistic and in support of your own national interests. So autonomy and independence together, can we combine the two? I think Tibetans in Tibet have spoken. What they are saying is, what we want is freedom for Tibetans and return of His Holiness Dalai Lama. They have put Tibet and Tibetan people front and center. Now we should focus on that aspiration. There is no room for debate now. Which side should be on? Tibetans in Tibet have said it very clear. This is what we want. Then focus on it. But if you want a further interpretation or translation of word freedom, I could give you what exactly do they mean, because sometimes the word freedom is misunderstood or misinterpreted. In Tibetan language, there are two words. For independence, they say rangze. Freedom, they say rawang. Rangwang means individual rights, power, freedom. At most, it could be self-rule, individual rule. Rangzen means sovereignty, your country. Now, of the 86 self-immolators, maybe 10 have said Rangzen. But 70 plus people, almost 90% have said Rawang. So now we have to respect what they're saying, because before they self-immolate, before they go to the street, they think it through what they want to say. Rawang or Rangze, they could choose of the two words. The fact that 90% chose Rawang and 10% chose Rangze, it says something. Right? Having said that, we are not saying that you should conclude one way or the other, but what we are saying is Tibetans in Tibet have made it very clear. They want freedom for Tibetans, return of His Holiness Dalai Lama. Now we should not look at each other, which side are you on? There is no side. They are giving up their lives. There is no hesitation on our part. There is no pause. There is no analysis left. They have spoken. This is what they want, and we support them. Now, if you are still debating, that means you are in JNU now. Tibetans in Tibet don't want that. They want you to act. Yes, Japanese parliament support, we really appreciate it. I was there in April. For the first time, 100 members of the parliament and the representatives came to see me, and I addressed the gathering. And it was very well received after a long time. People also, I gave several talks at Tokyo. Halls were all packed. And I met Shinzo Abe 4 times, the present president of LDP, and Taro Aso, the former prime minister, both former prime ministers. I met all of them. And the government of Japan was also kind enough to allow me and to share my thoughts with the people of Japan. So really appreciate it. So Japanese are very polite, but strong. Yeah, you seem to know already Tashi Dele and Tujishe, so you have a lot of Tibetan friends. You do not ask what you should do. I should talk to them. If they don't tell you anything, then you can write to me a complaint. Give me their names. They should be able to tell you what you should be doing for the cause of Tibet. This is the final word that I have, and I really enjoyed, should I say enjoyed? Yes. Coming here to JNU and faced famed, intellectually stimulating questions from brilliant and students of JNU and faculty members. So your coming here means a lot, not just to me, but to the Tibetan people. Firstly, the Chinese embassy official will take note. This troublemaker was in JNU. Again, the hall was packed. So that means at least you have interest and support for the Tibetan people. So in many ways, you are lending your hands and support to the Tibetan people. That in itself means a lot to us. And with so many good questions, I've done the best I could to answer. I'm sure I've not been able to satisfy many of you. But then there are a lot of Tibetans who are doing more research. There are many MA and MPhil and PhD students. They better come up with deeper analysis and substantive analysis to answer some of these profound questions. And but still, truth, we believe, is with us, and justice should prevail in Tibet. And with the support of all of you, as I said, I am made in India, born and brought up here. Tibetan cause is very democratic, based on Indian model of democracy. We follow ahimsa, and what we are saying is to preserve our Buddhist culture, which is also Indian origin. And India has vital interests as far as environment is concerned, water, security. If we succeed, if we, the Tibetan people, succeed, India and Indian people will succeed. And we have to succeed, and we will succeed one day soon. Thank you.
For all of us, it was very enlightening. because the Tibetan question has entered a new phase. Nowhere in the world people have remained colonized forever. But then nowhere in the world so many people offered their lives so voluntarily, so harmlessly, so non-violently. Self-immolation as the path for liberation is something quite amazing. And we are losing our confidence in wisdom of the people of the world. Politicians are always known to be pragmatic. They live for today because they know that there may not be a tomorrow for their power, for their chair. But civilizations don't live for today only. They have a past and they have a future. So all civilizations of the world have to answer these dying Tibetans who are trying to put an end to darkness in Tibet by burning themselves and turning themselves into torch of freedom and torch of light. As Dr. Lobsang told us, the frequency has increased in last 18 months. That means desperation has increased in last 18 months. Darkness has increased in last 18 months. It is a turning point in Indian foreign policy and defense policy. Therefore, Dr. Lobsang Sangay, your statement today from various corners of New Delhi is going to hopefully make some difference. Because the pinch of Chinese power is also now being experienced by the President of India, whose visit to Arunachal is objected, by the Prime Minister of India, by the policy makers of India. Just like the talks between China and Tibet, rounds after rounds after rounds, nothing moved. Same has been happening to the talks between India and China. So somehow, whether Indians like it or not, we are being put in the same boat in which the Chinese have put the Tibetans for so long. Let us wake up. Let us speak up. And these are times of policy paralysis. So I guess there is need of some kind of a democratic engagement for all of us, mostly for the knowledgeable people who are studying international diplomacy, who are studying Indian security, who are studying Chinese culture, Chinese politics, Indian economy, Tibetan situation. This is time to speak up. Your coming here was with a purpose, and the purpose was to remember the legacy of Jayaprakash Narayan, who was one of those most harmless individuals who did not go for power for his own persona, who never took any position, did not beg for vote for himself. But yes, whenever there was challenge to freedom, no matter where, from Hungary and Bangladesh to Tibet and Nepal, Jayaprakash ji was able to mobilize people and put them together in some kind of a reasonable process. Today again, we are missing him, but his legacy is there. And your coming here has connected you with the message given to us by the Dalai Lama when he came here a couple of years ago in the same series. And I'm very sure that those students who came here with a purpose, with some passion, because you came at a very bad time. This is the middle of the end of semester. And having studied in semester system yourself, you know that even the most sane minds go crazy in the end semester period. But many of them came only because there is some kind of an anxiety about Tibet growing in the younger minds. Many faculty members came. People from outside JNU came, from sister institutions. We want to thank you. And we want to be very clear. So far as we are concerned, we are being held guilty by our own past, by our own tradition, by keeping a very passive attitude about Tibetan question. It's not in the tradition of India to keep quiet, particularly when a brother or a neighbor or a sister is in trouble. We got to speak up. I don't want to take more of your time because we thought that we'll cover it between 3 and 5:15. So now with your presence, I'm sure that the new voice of Tibet, which is continuity of the same old passion for justice, truth, and non-violence. There is no ill will against China. There is no ill will against anyone who has been harming the Tibetan people. But yes, there is a great will for justice and for truth. And as he said, truth shall prevail and must prevail. I want to invite you now for your word of thanks, and then we complete this session. The session will be followed by a very well-made film on the middle path about Tibet. It has some words of wisdom from the Tibetan people, and it has some relevance for many of us who are today in the hall. Of course, it will be followed by some high tea. So after a little break, we'll come back and see the film. Save Himalaya movement, and Didi is trying to put together what we must be doing as people from the land of Buddha and Gandhi.
We are very grateful to Your Excellency for taking time out of your busy schedule to deliver the lecture. Thank you, sir. Professor Dr. Anand Kumar for facilitating this program in Jawaharlal Nehru University, and for your unconditional support for Tibet, for being a true friend of Tibet. Thank you, sir. Honorable Sikyong Dr Lobsang Sangay to kindly offer a scarf to Professor Anand Kumar as a gesture of our appreciation. I would also request Dr. Lobsang to felicitate Dr. Radha Bharchi. Students and faculties of JNU who came here for this talk. We wish you all a great exam ahead, especially for the ones who are sitting for the exams. Thank you all. Invite everyone for the group photo first, which will be followed by the high tea. Thank you all.